Welcome back, friends, to another episode of The Adventures of Abernathys Franklin. A handful of versions of Abby's made their way back to Venus to visit Treb at his cafe. So while they take a break for a snack, we're gonna go catch up with Nattie. She's made her way back to Fabian's French villa with a little gift from Franny Lynn. Let's pop in and see what's what. Recall entirely how it was that I managed to find my way solo back to Fabian's French villa, but I was certainly there, once again, to sleep one off. I had exceedingly enjoyed the spot of improv I'd taken in with Frankie and Franny Lynn. At the fourth dimensional after party, having partaken of some of Franny's best mind-expanding treats, I don't mind admitting that I found myself less than up to the task of continued revelry. I vaguely recall thinking that I ought to go have a lie down somewhere, and before I knew it, I was waking up on Fabian's couch to a friendly face looking down at me, rather amused. "Recovering from another bout of debauchery and indulgence, are we?" Fabian asked with a tickled sort of smile and bright, shining eyes. He was standing behind the couch and holding out a glass of water. "You know me," I replied groggily. "Never say no to a good time." I took the glass, sat up on the couch, and gave my neck a rub. I had the sore sensation of having slept in an odd position for too long, although thankfully, no indications of a hangover headache. I really must credit Franny Lynn where credit is due. Whatever mind-altering medicines she ever shares, they never leave one with unwanted after effects. "You know, you're lucky Fabian and I are off traveling so much," came Brodie's voice from the direction of the kitchen. I could hear him messing about with breakfast preparations. "One of these days, you're going to pop in here and find us in a compromising situation, and it's going to be your own fault." Fabian laughed. "He does have a point, you know," he said, seating himself in the armchair to my right and sipping a coffee. "And believe me," Fabian went on with a devilish smile, "if that ever is the case, I won't be bothering to pause in the middle of my own good time on account of a classic female version of me portaling in for a nap." "Fabian!" Brodie emitted from the kitchen. "You are so bad." He picked up something off the counter and threw it at Fabian, who snatched it out of the air. "You like it," Fabian sassed back to Brodie with a wink. "Oh, hush your face," Brodie said. "Nattie dear, how do you like your eggs?" "I would love them over easy, thank you, Chef Brodie," I said warmly, shifting to a sideways position on the couch, the better to converse with both my hosts. "What is that?" I looked at Fabian and pointed at the small plastic ball with flashing lights that Brodie had thrown at him. "One of our little ghost hunting toys," Fabian answered. "Well, actually, they're meant to be toys for cats, but paranormal investigators use them as makeshift motion sensors, too. Small and light so a spirit can move it easily, lights up so you can see if it's been disturbed." He lobbed the object in my direction playfully, and I turned my head instinctively to dodge it. I managed to catch the thing in both hands without looking, but the sudden movement of my head made my sore neck twinge. "Ah!" I breathed in discomfort. "I'm not up to sports yet this morning, thank you." I pitched the toy back at Fabian, and he caught it deftly in one hand while simultaneously sipping his coffee. Despite very definitely being a version of Abernathys Franklin, Fabian does not much resemble other Abernathys. For one thing, he's roughly a foot taller than most of us. Fabian had transitioned to male sometime around the age of 17, portaled himself to some dimension where the shift from one gender to another is about as slick and painless as a rest up at the Orion Spa. It's impolite to pry, so to date I never have, but I have often wondered if, at that same interstellar transformational facility, Fabian had not also selected additional changes or augmentations of facial and other features. Besides the extra inches in height, he also has rather the air of being a dark-haired Adonis, muscularly built and with a distinctive glittering quality to the iris of his eyes. Fabian started his own timeline hopping at the tender age of 6. I sometimes thought his extreme transformation, gender swap aside, may have secondarily had something to do with the need to distinguish himself from the multitude of other Abernathys Franklins that he had no doubt spent a good deal of his life bumping into. "I come bearing gifts," I said, reaching into the pocket of my jeans to retrieve 3 small glass vials containing about a dozen purple pills each. "Special paranormal investigation assistives from Franny Lynn," I explained, handing over 2 of the vials to Fabian. "Oh, Franny," Fabian said excitedly. "Doesn't she always have the most amazing magical medicines? Do they make us temporarily dead enough to commune directly with the spirits?" he asked, unscrewing the silver lid and sniffing at the contents. Ooh, I want to see," Brodie sang and danced his way around the counter to take up a vial from Fabian. Brodie held the vial up to the sunlight coming through the French windows. "Oh, look, they have some kind of gold metallic flecks in them. Leave it to Franny to have consciousness enhancers that are also gorgeous. Although, do they make us dead?" Brodie asked, looking in my direction. "Ah, there you have me," I confessed. I'm not sure I understood the specifics, but Franny went on about the Tower of Babel and something about Metatron and your third eye. The gist is you can see ghosts and talk with them. Regardless of the mechanics, she said each pill only lasts about 2 hours. Am I to understand that Nattie Jean is finally going to grace one of our investigations with her presence? Fabian asked in a feigned aghast sort of way. "After a spot of breakfast and a quick shower, I do think I'd be up to the task," I said casually. "If you'll have me, of course." "Oh, as if we wouldn't." Brodie waved a hand at me to dismiss the suggestion that they would decline my company and dashed back to the kitchen. "Breakfast for 3, shower for the party girl, and then off we pop to some desperately haunted ruin. Isn't it just shaping up to be the most perfect day?" By the time I was freshly dressed and making my way from the guest bathroom to the main living quarters, Fabian and Brodie were already sporting backpacks of gear, with Brodie gleefully hiding behind the lens of a fancy-looking video camera. "Aw, look! Our darling baby girl all cleaned up and ready for the spooks and specters," Brodie teased, aiming the camera at me. "Decadence and demons, that's my new motto." I played along, throwing one arm in the air and casting the other down in a showy curtsy for my paparazzi. Fabian summoned a portal ahead of us between the kitchen counter and the living room. "Abandoned asylum, no guarantee of demons," he said. "But for Nattie Jean's sake, we can always hope." Brodie stepped into the portal, and Fabian made a gesture like a doorman awaiting my entry ahead of him. I paused for a moment, having only just recognized something. "Where are you getting the Jean from?" I queried curiously. "From Frankie. I think she's right. Nattie Jean does have a nice ring to it." "After you." Fabian gestured again into the portal, and I stepped through. I had half an idea to ask when it was that Fabian had time to have met Frankie and learned her new addition of Jean to my name. But the moment we stepped through the portal into the relic of a former mental hospital, Brodie was blissfully directing our attention. "How spooktastic is this place already?" he said, pointing the camera at Fabian and I, and then into the open door of a room off the hallway that we had landed in. "Oh my god, there's a dusty wheelchair in the corner over there, you guys. How incredible would it be if it just started wheeling itself around?" Fabian gave Brodie an affectionate smile, as if seeing Brodie's excitement was more the reason for his being here than to actually find ghosts. "Maybe we should set up a static camera in here, see if it moves while we're exploring," Fabian suggested, taking off his backpack and beginning to pull out more equipment. Yes, absolutely. Let's do. Here, Nattie, you take the camera for a minute. Brodie thrust his video camera into my hands and went about helping Fabian. I aimed the camera in their direction. You do realize I'm an amateur at filming, I said to Brodie. If some grand event gets missed, I don't want to hear any complaints. Oh, you'll be fine, Brodie said, busily pulling various instruments out of his backpack. Oh, go scout out a spot where we can sit with the Ouija board and test out Franny's little tricks, like a nice open spot. Brodie's childlike joy at the idea of capturing ghost activity in such a dingy place was contagious to a degree. I followed instructions and set about searching for a good place to set out the good old talking board. I found a sort of common room space with large south-facing windows and a dusty old table with some folding chairs. It appeared that other such investigations must have taken place here before. I found a spot, I shouted, waiting for the boys to follow my voice. I was pointing the camera about at the various crumbling wall paint and graffiti, getting B-roll, I believe the expression is, when Brodie stepped into frame, followed by Fabian. Brodie took in a deep, pleased gasp. It's perfect! Oh my god, I'm so excited! I wonder who we'll talk to. Brodie and Fabian made quick work of setting up the camera a ways back from the table so that the three of us could sit in full view of the lens. With candles lit, Ouija boards set, and various other paranormal investigation toys set up around the room, we got our vials out and each popped one of Franny Lynn's little purple pills. How long do you suppose it takes? Brodie broke off before he could finish his question. We were immediately interrupted by the figure of a woman in a white gown, with long, dark, disheveled hair, who shuffled dazedly into the room from the hallway. Do you see her? Brodie seemed about ready to explode with excitement. Hello, miss. Are you a long-term resident here? Fabian asked in the ghost's direction, attempting to open friendly communication. The woman turned towards the table, her eyes not seeming to look at any of us in particular, and she loosed her lungs in an ear-splitting scream that H.P. Lovecraft would have called demoniac. Well, then again, does a ghost technically have lungs? In any case, her shrieking greeting completed, she simply turned back towards the hallway and continued her slow shuffling. Not much of a talker, I guess, I said with a hollow laugh. Can't win 'em all, Fabian replied. Brodie was sitting, mouth open in stunned silence, with a wild, happy look in his eyes. I was on the point of asking if he was okay, when another figure emerged from the opposite hallway. This one was dressed in a tidy black suit with a white shirt and tie. He spotted our cozy table and gave an exasperated eye roll. Ugh, another one of these ghastly ghost-hunting gangs, he said, stuffing his hands into his pockets. The man looked directly at us and bent forward at the waist a bit, and raised his voice as if he expected that we could not hear or see him. That one there can't spell worth a damn, I'm afraid, he shouted. So you've brought that board for nothing. Then he stood up straight and lowered his voice as if he were talking to himself. You won't catch me shoving a planchette around, trying to have a decent conversation one blasted letter at a time. Fabian giggled and nodded. I can see how that would become tiresome pretty quickly, and probably people always breaking up the letters into the wrong words. The man in the sharp suit started visibly, only just realizing that we were all looking directly at him. Well, I'll be dashed. Can you see me? He asked. And hear you very clearly, I replied. Nice suit. Where are you off to? The man looked down at himself and removed one hand from a pocket to smooth the front of his tie. Oh, this? He responded. Yes, I do pride myself for having had the sense to die in formal dinnerwear. I mean to say, dragging about the spectral afterlife in pajamas and stockings would be rather embarrassing for a man of my caliber. Fine for the poor souls who dragged around shrieking to the heavens in life, but not what I would have preferred for myself. Have a seat, friend. What's your name? Fabian reached over to an empty chair and pulled it to the table for our ghostly guest. In life, I was christened Bertram, though those who were close to me call me Brodie. The man seated himself in the chair offered by Fabian and sat down, smoothing out his suit again. Oh my God! Brodie burst out, finally emerging from his trance. You are a real ghost. Like, you died, and, you're dead and everything. Yes, quite, Brodie replied. Incidentally, this notion of you and your ghost-detecting brood that most of us do not recognize we are dead, it's perfectly incorrect. Rather, a lot of us are intentionally remaining behind a while. What about your screaming friend? I asked. Brodie made a sympathetic face. Ah, yes. Unfortunate, but there are those in this ethereal-type state not quite so aware of what they are doing. She'll fade into the proper next phase in time. But until then, well, haunting the place about sums it up. Brodie shook his head as if to dispel mental cobwebs and looked at Fabian. We are actually talking to a ghost. Fabian giggled again and took Brodie's hand. Yes, darling, we are. Maybe try not talking about him as if he's not here. We don't want to appear rude as long as we have this opportunity. Right, Brodie spurted. I am so sorry. I'm just so excited. And you do look fantastic. Brodie sat up a bit straighter at the compliment and smiled. Thank you. And I have to say, you're hardly the rudest group I've ever encountered. Quite civilized, actually. Brodie perked up, apparently remembering that this sort of conversation was precisely why he hunted for ghosts at all. Oh, tell us, how can we improve? I mean, these pills from Franny, obviously a big help. But for all the other investigators out there who don't have interdimensional hookups, what things do we do wrong? Ha, what things do you do right would be a better question. Brodie's voice betrayed annoyance. I mean, here I am, visiting the old alma mater, reminiscing of this and that, and into my memory lane swerves some obnoxious bloke with a camera shouting demands. Show yourself. Move this chair. Say our names back to us. Strikes entirely the wrong chord. What? Okay, yeah, Brodie said with a touch of embarrassment. I can see that. I wouldn't want someone shouting instructions at me. Skillfully redirecting conversation so as to save Brodie continued discomfort, Fabian interjected. Sorry, did you say alma mater? Oh, yes, Brodie said. Long before these halls were full of doctors and patients, it was a boarding school. I spent fully 6 semesters and 2 summers here in my youth. Shame they turned the rugby pitch into a parking lot. But that's progress for you, I suppose. Not any sort of expert purveyor of the paranormal myself, I was nonetheless sparked to learn more about ghostly existence. Wait, you were here in youth? But not when you died. So you're not stuck wandering in the place where you died? Not at all, Brodie stated. Those of us who consciously choose to remain behind can flit about as we please. It's the main reason to hang about. I've been to the Mariana Trench, the top of Mount Everest, explored the sunken ruins of Abernathys. There's quite a lot you can see in non-corporeal form, with far more ease than when still bound to the flesh suit. Atlantis is real? Brodie's eyes got wide, and he waved his hands in the air, evidently overjoyed with the new adventures of investigation he was beginning to see available to him with this new information. Not to mention 11 more purple pills from Franny to utilize at a later date. I have so many questions. Fabian's normally dazzling eyes flashed even brighter, and a thoughtful half-smirk played upon his handsome features. You know, with all the questions Brodie darling has, this conversation could easily go well into the night. Fabian shook his glass vial of purple pills from Franny thoughtfully. This might be more comfortable back at the villa. That is, if Brodie would be willing to experiment with stepping through a portal. Do portals work for ghosts too? I asked, intrigued. I can't say as I've made the attempt before, but I would be thrilled to find out, Fabian replied, giving Brodie an impish grin. I haven't the foggiest idea what a portal is, Brodie said, perhaps a bit intrigued himself. But, having been to the depths of the ocean without damage to self or my ghostly dinner jacket, I don't see any harm in accompanying you to this villa you speak of. Will there be coffee? Obviously, I can't drink it, but the smell still comes to me now and then in its presence. I do up a fabulous Turkish coffee, and I would absolutely be happy to make you your own. Brodie spat excitedly, jumping out of his chair. In a graceful, fluid motion, Fabian stood up from his chair and waved a hand to summon a portal back to the villa. Brodie excitedly popped through as Brodie rose and made his way towards the glowing light. Skin off your nose, Brodie said, and made a cheers gesture as if toasting Fabian before attempting his entry into the portal. Then, in he stepped. Nearly immediately, Brodie's head popped back through the portal. He made it, and he loves what we've done with the place. And then Brodie was gone. Fabian looked in my direction, and I caught that electric flash to his already sparkling eyes, as if he were highly pleased with the results of his experiment. He then made that sophisticated doorman holding the door pose, inviting me to enter the portal ahead of him. What about all of your equipment? I asked, indicating to the camera setup and still burning candles. Ah, Fabian nodded. He glided to the table and blew out the candles. We can come back for the equipment. And if we get too caught up in our interview with Brodie, we can always call in G-Sam to pack up the leftovers and bring them to the villa for us. He took up his post as portal doorman once more. Very well then, I said. Turkish coffee and more of Franny's magical ghost chat treats. And I stepped through the portal ahead of Fabian to greet Brodie and Brodie back at the villa. Hello again, friends. Now what paranormal investigator wouldn't just love to get their hands on some magic from Franny Lynn and speak to the spooks? I know I would. Thank you for listening. I do hope you've enjoyed this week's episode. If you'd like to support more adventures with Abby, do subscribe to my Patreon, patreon.com/AbernathyFranklin. Wherever you may be finding this podcast, BLM and give me a nice review. Subscribe and share with your friends. Don't forget, you can get some fun merch at my website, WaresbyFranki.com. And check out all my other fun nonsense. Links in the description. Until next time, as always, much love to you, my earthbound and cosmic friends. Wherever you are out there, I hope you're doing well.